Yellowstone National Park is home to some pretty incredible natural wonders. Its geysers are famous the world over, and its wildlife is the stuff of legend. But it also has something else, something that might just end all human civilization, a supervolcano. Yellowstone is one of 4 supervolcanoes in the world that could theoretically blow all life away from the face of the Earth. So we're going to tell you what these volcanoes are, how they work, why they're so dangerous, and whether or not you should probably start stocking up on canned lima beans right now. Let's talk about volcanoes. To understand what makes a volcano a supervolcano, you have to understand what any volcano is. A volcano is just a crack in the Earth's crust. These cracks exist because the Earth's crust isn't actually one solid piece. It's made of lots of smaller pieces called tectonic plates that slide around on top of the planet's hot, gooey mantle. And at mid-ocean ridges, where 2 plates slide apart, molten rock called magma rises up from the mantle to fill the gap. Sometimes magma finds its way to the surface through other cracks, and when it does, we call it a volcano. Magma is just rock that hasn't erupted yet, but once it erupts, we call it lava. Volcanoes come in all shapes and sizes, from small cinder cones to enormous composite volcanoes, but most of them are relatively small. They don't reach very high, and they don't eject huge amounts of material. Now, the reason for this is that the vast majority of magma is pretty thick. Think of it like cold honey, or maybe peanut butter. It's sticky and hard to move. Hotter, less viscous magma can flow more easily, but even so, most magma doesn't make it to the surface. The pressure of the overlying rock is enough to keep it underground, and in fact it takes only about 75 kilograms of pressure per square centimeter to keep magma at bay. That's equivalent to just under 3 letter-sized pieces of paper. But every once in a while, geological forces conspire to produce an unusually large amount of low-viscosity magma, and this magma builds up under the crust until the overlying rock can't contain it anymore. When that happens, a massive eruption occurs. Most scientists agree that an eruption needs to eject more than 1,000 cubic kilometers of ash and rock to be considered super. And depending on who you ask, there have been somewhere between 30 and 60 eruptions, this powerful, over the past 2 million years. Today, there are 4 active supervolcanoes on Earth: Yellowstone in Wyoming, Long Valley in California, and Manun and Aira in Japan. All of these supervolcanoes sit along the Ring of Fire, a horseshoe-shaped belt around the Pacific Ocean, where tectonic plates are colliding and creating the perfect conditions for massive volcanic eruptions. Interestingly, however, it seems that the number of supervolcanoes used to be far greater, but they've become much less common over the last 10 million years. Scientists aren't exactly sure why this is, but one hypothesis is that the Earth's mantle is gradually cooling down, which means that there's less magma available to fuel super eruptions. Others think that the continents have largely reached their current positions, which means that there's less and less places for new magma chambers to form. Either way, though, it does seem like mega eruptions are becoming rarer, which is good news for us, but also means that when one does occur, it will be all the more devastating. So let's say that one of these supervolcanoes erupts today. What would happen? To answer that question, we have to talk about the Volcanic Explosivity Index, or VEI. This scale assigns a number from 1 to 8 to volcanic eruptions based on how much material they eject and how tall the eruption cloud gets. Most volcanoes have VEI scores of 1 or 2, but supervolcanoes typically have VEI scores of 7 or 8. An eruption at Yellowstone, for example, would register a VEI of 8, which corresponds to an explosion that ejects more than 1,000 cubic kilometers of ash and rock and blasts the material 300 kilometers into the atmosphere. An eruption of this size would obviously be disastrous for anyone living nearby. Ash would bury entire cities and small towns, and the shockwave would flatten forests for miles around. But the effects wouldn't stop there. As the ejected material reached the upper atmosphere, it would start to spread around the globe. Depending on the wind conditions, entire countries or even continents could be blanketed in ash, and the more material ejected during the initial blast, the farther the ash would travel. Eventually, the ash would circle the entire planet and cover almost every part of the Earth's surface. But ash isn't the only thing to worry about. Supervolcanic eruptions also produce pyroclastic flows, incredibly hot mixtures of gas and solid debris that race down the sides of the volcano at over 100 kilometers per hour. Pyroclastic flows are so hot that they can burn entire forests to ash in seconds. And if the terrain is flat enough, they can travel for tens of kilometers from the volcano before finally coming to a stop. Even worse, if the eruption happens underwater, the water can flash into steam and cause giant tsunami waves that can travel thousands of kilometers across the ocean and inundate entire coastlines. All told, a VEI 8 eruption could destroy hundreds of cities, kill hundreds of thousands of people, and set back modern civilization by decades. In the past, such events have led to mass extinctions, wiping out 75% of all plant and animal species on Earth. And it's possible that another mass extinction could be imminent. So should you be stocking up on canned lima beans and bottled water just in case? Probably not. For one thing, it's very unlikely that any of these supervolcanoes will erupt anytime soon. Scientists monitor these volcanoes closely, and there's no sign that any of them are close to erupting. Even Yellowstone, which had a small eruption in 1985 and 1986, is not considered to be overdue for a major eruption. In fact, there's no way to predict when a supervolcano will erupt. Some have thousands of years between eruptions. Others may not erupt for tens of thousands of years. Even if you live near a supervolcano, then your risk of being affected by the next eruption is extremely low. You're more likely to be affected by rising sea levels or extreme weather events caused by climate change, and there's a lot more we can do to mitigate those risks. Not to mention the chances of a supervolcanic eruption causing a mass extinction are also extremely low. Even if Yellowstone were to blow tomorrow, it would take several years for the ash to spread around the globe. During that time, governments and organizations around the world could take steps to minimize the damage, and the world economy could prepare for the worst-case scenario. In other words, there's no need to panic. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep an eye on these volcanoes. If we learn more about what causes them to erupt and how they interact with the rest of the climate system, we'll be better prepared to protect ourselves against future eruptions. Speaking of protecting yourself, if you're watching this channel, chances are you're interested in science and tech stories. And the best way to get more of what you love is by supporting our independent creators. When you join, you'll get access to our creator-only podcast, Nebula, where you can hear fascinating conversations between some of the brightest minds in science and storytelling. One recent episode, for example, was all about the surprisingly explosive history of Mount St. Helens. Plus, you'll get access to all of the incredible content that's already on Nebula, like this video we did about the mysterious ancient city of Heraklion, which was recently rediscovered off the coast of Egypt. With your support, we can continue bringing you fascinating science and tech stories without having to worry about chasing the latest trends or satisfying any algorithms. So join us today and help us build the future of online learning and entertainment.